Crossed into the net by Kylian Mbappe.
Oh, Benyera, beautifully done.
Cornet finds Dembele. The first touch is good. The second is deadly.
Neymar still. Oh my word, what a goal.
Golovin. Lovely finish. Ajax delivery. Guendouzi's header. Here's an opportunity. Sanchez. Outrageous goal from Gael Kakuta. It's Payet again. And Dolberg. Messi again. This time maybe Messi's got it.
Hello and welcome to your weekly fix of all things French football. It's the official Ligue 1 podcast, Le Beau Jeu, which translates as The Beautiful Game. And today we look back at another thrilling weekend of top-flight action. There's a new boss at Olympique Lyon. Everywhere you look, there was a derby on the weekend. Passions were running high. There were penalties saved, penalties scored, red cards, of course, and a wonderful bouquet of volleyed goals. This is very much the League of Talents, of course, as a certain Désiré Doué proved yet again. I'm Robbie Thompson, full of cheap puns, your host. After 20 years in France and nearly a decade with PSG, I'm down under these days, waking up at all hours to keep abreast of all that moves in the hexagon, as it's known. And I'm pleased to say I'm joined by a regular podcast member and familiar voice to all fans of Ligue 1, one that is very much anchored in France today, the commentator, Andy Scott. How's it going?
I'm all right, Robbie. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Pleasure as always, Andy. It's been another big weekend for you. I always worry with the early starts on Monday morning when I see that one of our panel has been on the late game on a Sunday night, which also means highlights show, which means plenty of work. Now, another not so regular member of the podcast, but that only makes it all the more special, Baptiste Reynaud from Le Classique podcast is joining us today. Baptiste, how are you going?
I'm great, Robbie. Thank you, and thanks for having me.
An absolute pleasure. We remember your breakthrough pod last season, and we've been looking forward to getting you back on. So it's always good to have new voices, new opinions, and new perspectives on things going on in French football. You get a bit sick of us old hacks in Paris always talking about the same thing. So, and don't forget, if you, the listeners, have any questions, get them into us at ligue1podcast@gmail.com. Send us an email. And, of course, follow us, subscribe, rate us on all your regular podcast platforms. Well, without any further ado, let's get going with the big news over the weekend. The axe has fallen at Olympique Lyonnais. Before we hear about that, let's listen to what happened in the game, because after 4 losses in a row for the first time in 31 years, Peter Bosz had said that this was a must-win. In the end, Lyon were taking on Toulouse, and his job was very much on the line. Here's what happened with Jeremy Clement.
But a draw won't be enough, surely. They need a victory, and they could be up and running, and they are within just 2 minutes. Tete getting the slice of luck Lyon have desperately been searching for. Well, Peter Bosz looking nonplussed on the sidelines, but he must be absolutely delighted. The link-up play was sumptuous between Dembele and Lacazette, and Tete got the fortune as a deflected pass. Maxime Tupe, 1-0 to Lyon. Thiago Mendes on this occasion gets there first, but no players attempted more shots pulling a ball carry in Ligue 1 Uber Eats than Abuklal. Level with Dango Ouattara, and it should be Toulouse that are level. Raphael off the bench, put off by Tagliafico, and then on the spin, hits the post. But Toulouse suddenly waking it up. Spearings is strong, it's flicked through Abuklal, he goes down, but it falls to Raphael Ratau. A substitute's impact. Toulouse are level. Well, it's a horror show for Lyon. They got away with it at the corner when Spearings missed, but the Dutchman then winning the ball. Van der Boomen initially, Spearings second, and then Van der Boomen poking it through to Abuklal. And it's Raphael Ratau who comes at the blind side with 3 Lyon defenders on the deck. And it is more defensive woes for Olympique Lyonnais.
Well, we're not going to spend too much time actually talking about the football in the end because it ended up 1-1. That must-win game for Peter Bosz was not won in the end. Toulouse rode their luck at times, but Lyon, who went ahead very early in the contest through Tete, unable to play out for the 3 points. Let's go to you first, Baptiste. Peter Bosz, the Dutchman, the man that used to play for Toulon in the French top flight. Did he have to go? Was his time up?
I think so. I think it was a logical decision. It just felt like things were dragging on, and actually, even over the summer, it felt like we were already running towards the end of his time. And I think, in all honesty, no one saw anything of any improvement since the start of the season. We were seeing the same issues at the club, sort of both on and off the pitch in terms of the management as well off it, which didn't help him, but certainly on the pitch, he was just unimaginative and didn't seem to have the backing of the players, which came out even more with the Lacazette post-game interview. So I think that was a logical call.
That was a big moment when Lacazette appeared to just say, "Look, I don't make these decisions. That's up for other people to make that decision. How long we're going to keep this coach?" I mean, it was pretty brutal. There's a lot riding on this season. I mean, he came back. Corentin Tolisso came back as well. This hasn't been the homecoming that two glorious youth products from the club had been expecting. Andy, the news came out about half-time during your match last night that Laurent Blanc, Larry White, is at last returning to French football with Olympique Lyonnais.
Yeah.
Andy, good appointment to see him back?
Well, it's a good question because on the face of it, obviously Laurent Blanc is a great name, and I think you and I would both agree that we're probably a bit nostalgic for his Paris Saint-Germain team because even today I would say that PSG team has not been matched actually since he departed in 2016. You know, they've gone through the coaches in that time. Obviously, PSG changed the project with Neymar and Mbappe, and things changed there. But his PSG team was terrific, but we're talking about 6 years ago that he departed. Obviously had a spell in Qatar recently, but let's be honest, kind of out of the spotlight for European football fans. So 6 years is a long time. You know, he's a great name. He's somebody who commands respect. He was a wonderful player. He's had success as a manager. It wasn't just at PSG. He of course won the league at Bordeaux and had great success there. But it's obviously any managerial appointment is a gamble. I just think that with as Baptiste was saying with Peter Bosz, he had to go. I think that Lyon couldn't afford to wait any longer. There've been these suggestions, the talk in the media, that they might wait until the pause for the World Cup to make the change, but they had to move now. I mean, they're already being cut a long way adrift of the European places. It's not good enough. There's a sense of a club adrift in so many respects. You know, obviously the sale of the club to the American businessman John Textor, you know, that seems to be dragging a little bit, certainly longer than Jean-Michel Aulas had hoped. So that there's problems off the field and big problems on the field too. You know, they've got good enough players for Laurent Blanc to get more out of the team. They've got a defence that needs to be improved drastically. But if Laurent Blanc can do that, then he's got the players in midfield and attack. He's got a good goalkeeper for them to certainly be doing better than they are doing. But when you ask me if it's a good appointment, I mean, it's impossible to say until we've seen what he's going to do with the team on the field. And in terms of the Lyon players, it comes down to the two big signings being Corentin Tolisso and Alexandre Lacazette. It's always a gamble to bring players back to a club. And in the case of these two, you know, two fabulous players who departed 5 years ago, but you could always argue, you know, are they as good as they were? Tolisso's had all kinds of fitness problems. Lacazette will score goals for them. But you could be very revisionist and say, well, maybe this Lyon team is not as good as we thought it was. Just as you could be very revisionist and say, was Peter Bosz ever as good a coach as Lyon thought they were getting? He's the man who took Ajax to the Europa League final in 2017, but he's also the man who didn't win the league with Ajax with a fabulous set of players. He didn't do brilliantly in Germany with Borussia Dortmund and Bayer Leverkusen, probably underachieved at these clubs. And he's massively underachieved in Lyon. So let's just see if Laurent Blanc can get them at least back to where they should be.
Laurent Blanc, as a player, he was Montpellier's and still is Montpellier's all-time leading goal scorer until they won the league amazingly in 2012. He was, of course, a part of that side that won the Coupe de France back in 1990 as well, with a certain Carlos Valderrama, Eric Cantona back in those days. So that was quite the team as well. He's a curious character, Laurent Blanc, and I'll tell an anecdote, or at least of my experiences with him as well, because he played for Napoli and then went from Napoli to Nîmes and then to Saint-Etienne, then won the double with Auxerre, then went to Barcelona, didn't really make it there, came back to Marseille. That was a great period for the French national team while he was at Marseille. That's when they won the World Cup. Then he went to Inter, and then at Manchester United as well. He had a couple of moments where he was near retirement, and he retired in the end in 2003. But he did win the World Cup in 1998 and the Euro in 2000. That was the real moment for French football, that put Les Bleus really on the map. Then into coaching. You're right, Andy, at Bordeaux, champion in 2009, and probably should have been a champion in 2010 as well. They were running away with the title when he announced that he was leaving to take over the national team, and that really scuppered that entire Bordeaux campaign. They just seemed to come apart at the seams. He then moved to PSG after another break, and PSG, he won 3 titles in a row. They finished 2016 season with 96 points, the most points ever in a Ligue 1 season. Andy, when he talks about nostalgia for that team, it was exactly that. And having seen that from a little bit on the inside, I mean, in 2015 and 2016, they won back-to-back quadruples. They won everything that there was to win. They scored more goals than had ever been scored. They registered more points with that 96 points than had ever been registered. And to this day, that record still stands. But what impressed me the most about Laurent Blanc and the way he did things was that he let that changing room, that squad of players, just look after themselves. He's since come out and said that he wasn't allowed to do much in that first year at PSG, and that it wasn't an easy job for him. But what I thought he did really well was not get involved in all the carry-on. He was above all that. He was he was a manager in the great English sense of the word, in that he made the final decision on everything, but he didn't get involved in politics with inside the playing squad of who said this and who said that. He didn't take sides. On the training pitch, he had Jean-Louis Gasset, his right-hand man, who took the training sessions and organized so much. And I just had the feeling that he had a maturity and that experience as being an ex-player that, he had Zlatan Ibrahimovic and his lieutenants in that squad. There was Thiago Motta, Thiago Silva, Maxwell. They brought in Blaise Matuidi into their group. There was the youngster Marco Verratti. There was a natural order in that playing squad that I don't think they've had since, and that they're trying to, that has been problematic in that squad since then. I mean, Zlatan was an incredible figure, but the coach allowed natural order in that changing room, and it really worked. It worked, and on the pitch, as Andy said, they had an identity that they haven't rediscovered since. They had that 4-3-3. They played possession football. They destroyed teams the way we haven't seen really in the last couple of years, even in a great team under Thomas Tuchel that went all the way to the Champions League final. To bring it back then, Baptiste, after my trip down memory lane to talk about PSG, I'd like you to take a trip down memory lane and talk about Olympique Lyonnais, because before Bordeaux won the league in 2009, Andy and Baptiste, but Baptiste first, this is the Lyon side that we thought would just rule forever. I mean, they were solid. They had a solid owner. They were the envy of the rest of the league. They were bringing in good recruits every time. They had a fantastic youth system. They had Bernard Lacombe, who was like this sporting director, but assistant or advisor to the president, Jean-Michel Aulas. And they just didn't seem to put a foot wrong for 7 titles in a row, something that has not been equaled in French football, even by this Paris Saint-Germain squad. So how has that changed? Now we're seeing coaching appointments every year and a half. We're seeing sporting directors every year and a half. We've got Bruno Cheroux now. We've got these new owners, as Andy said, John Textor, but that's been, not coming off now. And now that's been pushed back perhaps until the World Cup or beyond. Baptiste, what has gone on with this Olympique Lyonnais?
It's a good question. I think They were very, very modern in the early 2000s, as you said. Lacombe and Olas were very forward-looking, and you could tell that in the way they built their infrastructure with Tola Vologe, the academy, which they poured a lot of money in. So they had a real sustainable feel to that side, and they were investing smartly in buying players from Ligue 1 who knew the league and who were basically the best players in the league. So Michael Essien, for example, that they bought from Bastia was a great example of that. I think since then they've sort of been resting on their laurels slightly. I think they have struggled to modernize. I think the parallels with Manchester United are quite interesting. That Man United were the same forward-looking club, using their youth team and investing smartly, developing their infrastructure, and then they have fallen by the wayside with a mixture of sort of hubris, arrogance, and failure to regenerate. I think that's been the case at Lyon. Aulas still has all the powers, and he's obviously someone who's been proven time and time again to be right for a long time, but he hasn't necessarily been challenged. And from what I hear is the infrastructure at Lyon is very archaic. The organizational structure is very lean and very weak. They don't have a lot of scouting. They don't have a lot of decision makers who can challenge each other, and that makes for a disunited front, I think, at the club. I think there's also been a question before the Textor potential takeover as to how do they ensure that they have the funds available to them, and they have sort of built a system that is a bit of a trading system in trying to promote players to sell them on, which hasn't necessarily been the OL DNA, and it's that panic now of trying to get back that DNA that's brought them to get Lacazette and Tolisso back on track, back at the club, for example, and that hasn't really worked. So I think for me, it's just a very confused club. I think they don't have a real sense of direction. I think they're different people pulling in different directions, and that's causing a little bit of chaos at the club. And once you make certain wrong choices, like it seems Peter Bosch clearly was, then things start to unravel. So we'll see what happens with Blanc. It is a big appointment, I think, for Lyon. In when you consider recent times, it's a massive gamble for them, and they need to get back to the top, because a healthy Lyon, a successful Lyon is good for the league. There's a lot to like about that club, but we've got to wait and see with Laurent Blanc.
Andy, quickly, yeah, because they've got a brand new stadium as well. I mean, well, brand new. They've got a great stadium.
Yeah, exactly. And I think well, Baptiste makes the comparison with Manchester United. I think on the one hand, Manchester United are playing in a league where if they finish fifth, that could be seen as that might happen in the Premier League, right? There are so many teams up there at the top where they could have a good season and still finish fifth. In the case of Lyon, they're a club who should be, I think you'd say that they might not qualify for the Champions League every year because PSG are going to finish in the top three. There's only 2 automatic qualifying spots. You've got Monaco, you've got Marseille, you've got 1 or 2 other ambitious clubs like Nice and Rennes. So for Lyon, to finish in the Champions League places every year is not easy, but they shouldn't really be finishing out with the top 4, you would say.
Yeah.
This is the second time in 3 seasons in which they've not been in Europe at all, and that is clearly not good enough for them. And they have got a marvelous stadium. There's so much going on around that particular complex. Obviously, they've got a wonderful training ground. They're talking about building a basketball arena, aren't they, in partnership with the local basketball club, who are one of the leading basketball teams in Europe, ASVEL. So the infrastructure is all there, and of course, the women's team is fantastic. I mean, the women's team won the Champions League back from Barcelona last season. They've got some of the best women's players in the world, not least Ada Hegerberg, of course, and many of the top French players. And they are very strong, albeit in a very different footballing landscape. They Jean-Michel Aulas deserves huge plaudits for the investment he's made into women's football, the way in which he has given them a focus, whereas other clubs have maybe been slower to do that. But on the men's side, it's just been left behind, and the danger is that they really do become left behind. I mean, they had to act now in terms of changing the manager, otherwise it really would have been too late. And this is a club who've been in, they've been in the top 20 of the Deloitte Football Money League. They're very clearly the second force financially in French football behind PSG. In that regard, they can generate a huge amount of money, and if they can fill that stadium and get 50 to 60,000 people coming there for every game with a successful team on the park, they really can be a major force in the European game. So yeah, they had to act now before it was too late, and fingers crossed for Laurent Blanc that he can turn things around.
Well, that's what he's charged with doing, isn't it? Is Laurent Blanc the man to turn it around, or is he just the latest one to receive the poison chalice that is the head coaching job at the moment of Olympique Lyonnais? Another club that is playing in Europe and is starting to turn things around after a couple of hiccups early in the campaign is Stade Rennais. Now, Rennes had the big derby against Nantes, the Breton derby. It's the capital of the Breton region against the city that used to be, or is the historic capital of that region in Nantes. Nantes came into this game in the bottom four and lost in Europe in midweek. Rennes came into this game on the charge, climbing back towards the top five. They're not there just yet, but and with a good win in Europe as well. Let's have a listen to Angus Turode, who called all the action.
A little bit of a press coming from Nantes, but Rennes have got round it well. Here's Martin Terrier into Cali Moendo. Moendo's got it in, and it's got in there from Armand Guiri. Lightning reactions in the middle from the former Nice man. And the deadlock is broken midway through the first half. Well, they got away from the Nantes press. Martin Terrier through to Cali Moendo. And a nice ricochet bounce off the legs of Palois. Just put it at a lovely height for Guiri to get his head there. And Armand Lefort beaten at point-blank range. Nice from Borojo finding Maya, always coming through. Goal to Terrier. Incisive, just like that. One goal becomes a 2-0 lead. Well, that's two of the men who scored in last week's 3-0 win away at Strasbourg, who've also scored in this game. Well, that was laser-like from Rennes. Points in the bag now, and they stay in touch with the top five as a result. Terrier across, Doué, another chance for him! Oh, wonderful! His second touch since coming on is a screamer of a goal. One end of the pitch to the other. Truffert thought about the shot, went with Terrier instead, and Terrier saw the opportunity. But look at this for a connection. Alban Lefort given next to no chance. The teenager makes it 3-0. Mustafa Mohamed trying to go through, and it's a red card. Mustafa Mohamed goes down, and Joe Rodon will go from the pitch. Ludovic Blas, Moses Simon, take your pick. It's going to be Ludovic Blas, and is saved by Steve Mandanda. Maybe the clean sheet will be kept after all. Back in by Simon, and Mandanda catches it again. Well, it was hit pretty well. That's a great save. A terrible day for Antoine Camboire and his Nantes side.
Well, Andy, Desiree Doué scored the winner in Kiev, and he scored again in the Breton derby now. I think he'd scored another goal in a Breton derby as well earlier in the season. He's a kid, and excuse the pun, which I started at the top of the program with. Doué means talent in French, or talented, and this kid is very doué. And that's also 3 goals in 5 for Amin Guiri since his move from Nice. A third assist to go with a goal in 2 games for Arnaud Calimuendo. Martin Terrier scored another great goal, and he, I think, is now within striking distance of Alexander Frey as the top scorer since the turn of the century for Stade Rennais. Things are coming together nicely there, Andy.
Yeah, they are, and they should, because they've invested a lot of money in that playing squad. So they should be doing well. They should be there or thereabouts in the battle for European qualification. Of course, they've been regulars in Europe in recent seasons. The aim for them has to be to get through their Europa League group and qualify for Europe again next season. Whereas Nantes are probably, unsurprisingly, handicapped by being involved in Europe at all. Nantes were beaten by Freiburg on Thursday, which was no major surprise because Freiburg are doing very well this season. They're having a wretched time, and no surprise that Rennes won that game. I mean, I think their unbeaten run goes back now to the game at Lens at the end of August, so they're motoring very nicely in the league. And Désiré Doué does look like a terrific talent, doesn't he? I mean, that was our pick for goal of the week in Ligue 1 this weekend. Just a sensational finish. That's what Rennes do. They bring through talented young players. We've seen them develop Ousmane Dembele and Eduardo Camavinga in recent years, and I suspect it's very early days because he's a very young man, but Désiré Doué looks like he could be the next one to eventually move on from Rennes for an awful lot of money at some point in the future, which they're going to need. I mean, there were reports, actually, it was reported by L'Equipe last week. They kind of raised the point that Rennes are going to start having to deal with financial fair play issues in UEFA competitions, and they have invested huge amounts of money in the playing squad, relatively speaking, of course, but they don't generate anything like as much money as the very biggest clubs in Europe. They've not got an enormous stadium. So at some point, they're going to have to start thinking about bringing money in. So maybe Désiré Doué, because these things happen very quickly in football. You know, the big English clubs and the big Spanish and, well, we look, you know, the Mathys Tel, of course, who left Rennes in the summer for Bayern Munich for about 40 million euros, having barely played a first-team game. I suspect that Désiré Doué will be on the list for a number of big European clubs in the very near future if he carries on like this.
Baptiste, your classic podcast talks a lot about the historical side of French football, and you're doing your Tour de France at the moment. You've just been in Brittany. Is this 3-0 result for Rennes in the derby just confirming what we all know, that the power has really shifted in that region, that Rennes, with the Pinot backing of that mega rich family, have just got it over Nantes now, and they're streaking ahead. Is that how you see it?
Yeah, absolutely. I think they've obviously got the Pinot money, but they have also built smartly over the last 10 or 15 years. You know, they have invested a lot of money in recent years as they've been more and more successful. But that's also been the product of building the academy, which has probably been the best in France over certainly the last 5 to 6 years, if not 10 years. And they've built that infrastructure. In that sense, they are very similar to the Lyon of the early 2000s, or, you know, all things considered in the strategy, not necessarily in the success that they're having, which isn't equivalent to Lyon's, but certainly in the way they're going about things. And so, yes, they are the powerhouse in Brittany at the moment. I think Nantes always have highs and lows. There's always chronic instability with Kita. Comboiré had obviously brought a little bit of strong will and consistency to that side last year, and he had a lot of legitimacy with the fans, which was great as well, and a lot of straight talking. But with a combination of Europe and the loss of Colomwani up top is proving difficult for Nantes this year. So to see them suffer a 3-0 defeat at the weekend against rivals who are, you know, on a winning run wasn't surprising, and it is the state of affairs at the moment between those clubs. Yeah.
Moving on, another side that's doing very, very well at the moment is AS Monaco. We've been chatting about them on and off all season because they missed out on the Champions League group stage. It was very difficult pill to swallow for them again, and the pressure was really on Clement, their coach. They've made it 5 wins in a row now. They're on the charge. They overcame Montpellier by 2-0. Briolibolo continuing his good form, and a rare appearance and a first goal of the season from Miron Boadou, the Dutchman, who was, they had a little bit of expectation about him last season, and it just didn't happen for him at all. He's finally on the score sheet. I think he played under a half of football in midweek in Europe as well, so hopefully he's turned the corner now as well. But Monaco have certainly turned the corner. Elsewhere, Clermont got up 2-1 over Auxerre. Saifeddine Howie and Gréjean Quier getting the goals there. Benoit Costil probably beaten too easily on the second goal by Gréjean Quier. That's 2 in 2 games for him. Though I think it did take a bit of a deflection, which saw it curve and swerve rather outrageously for him. But that's an excellent result for Clermont, who are amazingly up to 7th as well in the league. We're talking about FC Lorient a lot. Clermont are really raising a few eyebrows as well at the moment. Now, I'd like us to move our attentions to Marseille, and what I've decided will be our performance of the week this week. Ajaccio got the win, and this is not tongue-in-cheek and not being a Paris Saint-Germain supporter bringing out a performance of the week like this, but Dimitri Payet scored from the penalty spot, 100 goals to go with his 100 assists that he's got in French football. He's the first player in the 20th century to achieve that. It is a fantastic result. He's been waiting a little while for that 100th goal, Andy, because he passed the 100 assists mark a while ago now, I think at the end of last season as well. But look, this was a great personal result for him, but a big upset with Ajaccio getting just their second win of the campaign.
Yeah, yeah, a huge upset. Not a result that anybody saw coming, because Ajaccio, I think, I think Ian said on the podcast last weekend, and difficult to disagree with the sentiment, that Ajaccio are probably going to finish in the bottom four this season. Even with that result, just their second win, albeit a second straight away win for them. A great result for them. What it indicates is that, Marseille are going to have the odd slip up. They've had a fine start to the season. Probably even their own fans had not expected them to do so well. It's a very untimely defeat, because they play Paris Saint-Germain this coming weekend at the Parc des Princes. It would have been great from their perspective. Also, think from the point of view of the neutral, if they could have kept up the winning record and gone into that fixture in an even stronger position. My apologies, because I'm having to look at the league table here. I haven't got it off the top of my head, but yeah, had they won that game, they would have been level on points to PSG going into the Classic. Now there's a 3-point gap, and you suspect that it might be 6 points come Sunday night, because PSG at home against Marseille might well come away with the victory. So it gives you an idea of some of the limits of the Marseille team. I know that Igor Tudor made a lot of changes to his starting lineup, but you would expect them to have enough to beat Ajaccio. Now they come into a huge week, because it's not just the Classique, and that is a fixture that they, if they lose it, it's no disgrace. They saw Lens lose, as we'll talk about, so they still have their place intact in the top three, and that, at the end of the day, is the main thing for them. And the two Champions League games against Sporting are the really big things at the moment. They got the win at the Velodrome last midweek, helped by some dodgy goalkeeping from the Sporting goalkeeper, in fairness. Now they go to Lisbon, and that is just a massive match. I mean, they can't afford to lose. Maybe a draw would be a useful result, which keep them alive in the competition. But it's a huge game, that, for Marseille, because as we talked about before the campaign began, they really needed, and they do need to do something in Europe this season, because the last couple of Champions League campaigns have been so poor. So if they can do that, and if they can put up a good showing against PSG, then we can put the Ajaccio result down to a one-off, which is what Igor Tudor said he hoped it would be this weekend.
And staying down south, Nice got up 3-2 over Troyes. Mattia Vitti got his first goal, the 20-year-old Italian, the first Italian to score for Nice since Mario Balotelli. So not that long ago, actually, in case you were thinking that, who's an Italian that had scored for Nice? Well, Balotelli just 4 years ago now. Yep, as well. Pepe earned the penalty that Andy Delors scored, and then Pepe got a goal for himself before Chevalerin and Conte got two late goals that were a bit of a scare for Nice, but in the end, Nice prevailing. More good news for their beleaguered coach as well, Lucien Favre, who's still under a bit of pressure. Now, last week, we gave 3 reasons Strasbourg fans should keep the faith. They got a win. Amazingly, obviously, we've helped them turn the corner here on Le Beau Jeu. Angers beaten at home 3-2. Look, Strasbourg were bottom of the league when they were at kickoff. Angers are now not far off the bottom. They're also having a pretty tough campaign. But look, they scored some nice goals as well. There were some fantastic goals in this game, in fact. Kevin Gamero scored a wonderful left-footed volley. Adrien Unu then scored a fantastic left-footed volley as well. This one had it all. Own goals, goalkeeping mistakes. Diallo got a very simple tap in, the one that really sealed the deal after Angers goalkeeper Fofana, who's in for Bernardoni, who's been making too many mistakes. He made a mistake that cost them the goal. In the end, a first win of the season for Strasbourg, and an important one. They desperately needed it, and so did Julien Stéphan. Time for our Déjà Who. Now, last week we got a return to normality. We had plenty of correct answers for the Déjà Who from our trivia experts that listen. I've got another one for you coming up today then. Déjà Who. Email us the answer at league1podcast@gmail.com, and you'll go into the draw for the jersey that we hand out at the end of the month. So here we are for this one. Who am I? I am one of the most famous footballers of the modern era. I won 2 domestic championships before my goal-scoring talents brought me to France. My first silverware was the Coupe de France, before a big money move saw me secure the Ligue 1 championship as well as 3 more domestic cups. A successful spell in Italy was followed by another high-profile move to England before returning to France with a 3rd different club. I won football's greatest individual honour. After I retired from football, I stepped away from the game, but remained very much in the public eye, and people can still hear my name at football grounds around France to this day. There we go. A couple of, I think there's enough clues in there. Baptiste, I saw you nodding around and at one point looking like you may have been onto something. Don't tell us, but do you have an inkling?
I'm hesitating still, but I think I'm quietly confident that I might have it.
Okay, we'll put it in the group chat afterwards in a moment. Andy, I won't ask you because I know you almost certainly got that one. So we're moving straight on then. Now, last week we had 3 sides that were undefeated. We've just seen that Marseille lost that. We will find out what happened to Lens in a little bit as well. But Paris Saint-Germain were the other undefeated side. They took on Stade de Reims, rather. It finished 1-1. PSG just victims of their busy schedule at the moment because Reims were in the relegation zone at kickoff. There was no Lionel Messi. Andy, no Messi, no party. Neymar was on the bench as well. Mbappe has been not so happy the last few weeks. He's been coming out in the press talking about positioning. His words have been interpreted as trying to just influence a little bit or show his muscle, that his newfound status at the club. Is this a first little turbulence for what has otherwise been a honeymoon start for Christophe Galtier?
No, I wouldn't say it's the first turbulence. I think there have been a couple of other games in which they've not been fantastic. I mean, I think back to the game against Brest at the Parc des Princes about a month ago, in which they won 1-0 without playing brilliantly. I mean, it's a little bit like what I just said about Marseille. This game falls at a time in between 2 Champions League games against Benfica, which are important. I mean, they drew in Lisbon last midweek with an absolutely marvellous goal by Lionel Messi. And they play Benfica at home at the Parc des Princes tomorrow. And then it's the game against Marseille. So logically, Christophe Galtier had to rotate the squad at some point. I mean, again, I've said this before. What's the point having all these great players sitting on the bench? You got to use them at some point. The issue for them is that they're not going to get too many chances to impress. When they do come in, they have to take it. And if things are not working for them, after 50 minutes, they get shipped off. And of course, when Carlos Soler comes into the team for his first start, the very fact that he's playing means that Messi's not playing and he doesn't get to play alongside Lionel Messi. So the situation is different for these guys when they come into the side. So PSG were weakened, still, on paper good enough to be beating a team like Reims. But I think there are 2 things about this game, really. One is that I thought that the Marquinhos gave an interview at halftime when he came off the field just after Sergio Ramos had been sent off, and he said, "I can't believe it. Why? What do the referees have in for us?" Now, bear in mind they're playing against the Reims team who'd had 6 red cards in the first 9 games. I'm sorry, but it is not for PSG to say, what have the referees got against us? The referees have nothing against Paris Saint-Germain, absolutely nothing. The referees do seem to have something against Reims because they sent off 6 of their players in the first 9 games of the season. So, on this occasion, it was PSG's turn to have a man sent off. Sergio Ramos probably didn't say anything that really deserved a red card, but you shouldn't be doing that. You can't afford to get up in the face of the referee just after you've been booked for a challenge, whether you deserve the yellow card or not. So that was stupid from Sergio Ramos, who still doesn't learn at the age of 36. So, no sympathy for PSG at all in that respect, but lots of credit for Reims because it was a terrific battling performance from a struggling team. First clean sheet of the season for them. I thought they defended really well
as well,
and without their coach, Oscar Garcia, who had to go back to his native Barcelona for family reasons. So we had the brilliantly named Will Still, who sounds like a pop star, but the Belgian assistant coach of Reims taking charge of the team and they put in a great performance.
Like Tintin.
Yeah, he does. Well, he does. He does. He's a very distinctive looking chap, and he obviously got a tune out of the team. So all credit to them, despite the fact they're playing against 10 men. It's still a great result against Paris Saint-Germain to get a point. And let's give them the credit and just say for PSG, not been a bad weekend for PSG. Marseille lost, Lens lost. They went to Reims without Lionel Messi. They left him behind, and they still got a point on the road. So let's not worry about Paris Saint-Germain.
Well, full credit to Stade de Reims. You have to go back to 2011, December 2011, to find the last time a team took so many shots at goal against Paris Saint-Germain. Reims had 24 shots at goal in this match, only beaten back in 2011 by the 30 shots by Saint-Etienne, who were, of course, coached by Christophe Galtier back then as well.
And also Andy, just on Galtier, the last 0-0 draw that PSG had was against Nice last season, managed by Christophe Galtier. And Nice did a defensive job on PSG on that occasion, just like Reims did at the weekend.
In the cup?
No, it was in well, yeah, of course, in the cup, in the league, yeah,
in the cup as well.
So the two matches, Galtier's been the opposition manager, so maybe there's a theme there.
Baptiste, looking ahead to the other of that trio of in-form sides then, Lorient. Now they were taking on a Brest side who were winless in 6, but this was another derby match. Lorient, incredibly, were looking, I think, for their 6th win in a row. We talk about it every week on the podcast. Can they keep going? Can they keep this up? They have a team of underrated players. We're just talking about, that Marseille can slip up, that Paris Saint-Germain have been complaining and dropped points, that Olympique Lyonnais are in all sorts of trouble at the moment, despite having what Andy quite rightly said is the second biggest financial potential in the league. And here's little FC Lorient, who are still doing it. And Terem Moffi scored an absolutely stunning goal as well to equalize, because they fell behind early to Del Castillo. But what are they doing right? And this, again, we can talk about minnows of a Breton region. This is a small club, smaller than Brest historically as well, smaller than Rennes, smaller than Nantes, smaller than Guingamp historically as well. And Guingamp's we're getting quite small now. And here's Lorient. What are they doing right? It's a remarkable story.
They're just surfing a positive wave at the club, and I think Régis Lebris deserves a huge amount of credit. It's the culmination of work that he's carried out at the club. He's been there for a number of years, running the academy and then the reserves, so he knows those players inside out, and he's coached them to become better. I think is also something that we're seeing, and I think they had to go in that direction because it wasn't working with Pélissier, and Lorient don't have a lot of money available, so they went for internal improvement. And he's a man who's developed his coaching alongside the likes of Franck Hez and Julien Stéphan at Rennes, and we're seeing what that means. I think for me, he's clearly a coach that is executing the basics at the club. It certainly feels like he's a coach at the training ground, stopping his players to really individually coach them. And the reason I say that is because one of the absence this weekend, Dango Ouattara, was just a bit part player last year who looked short of confidence and a little bit overwhelmed. And this year, his decision-making, his technical ability are so crisp that can only come from hours and hours of coaching and of encouragement. And I think that's what Lebris has done with a number of players. Moffi, one of them. Enzo Lefebvre is burgeoning into the players that a lot of people thought he would become, but didn't necessarily under Pélissier, and he's playing in a variety of roles. And I think on top of that, you have players who know one another and who have genuine desire to get better and to work hard. I think the Abergel, who had the assist for Moffi at the weekend, came off because he had a broken wrist, which had occurred before, or he played with a broken wrist, I think, when he had the assist. And I think that's a good symbol of Lorient. It's playing through the pain and with a little bit more ambition that they have had in the past, and it's paying off immediately and surprisingly. And they've already won as many games this season as they did the whole of last season, which is an amazing achievement.
That's the second stat of the week. 8 wins. That's as many as all of last season when they only just survived the drop as well. I mean, it has been a remarkable turnaround. Hypothetical, and we won't have time to chat about it, but keep this in the back of your minds. PSG play Lorient at 1 p.m. early kickoff, which are notoriously difficult for Paris Saint-Germain historically, on the 6th of November. Will it still be 1v2 just before the World Cup? Paris Saint-Germain players won't be wanting to get too involved with the World Cup just 2 weeks away. That could be a real mouth-watering prospect there as well. Final match of the round. Speaking of mouth-watering prospects, the Derby du Nord. It's one of the most passionate, one of the fiercest rivalries on the French football calendar. And Lens had it over Lille last season. 3 consecutive wins, including in the Cup. Andy Scott, you called all the action of this one.
Stadium is pretty much full tonight as that ball is played through. Machado is chopped down. The referee points to the spot. Lens have a penalty. And a yellow card shown. Well, José Font disagrees with the decision. He does make contact with the man. Brilliant running from David Machado. Lorient Sotoka to take it for Lens. Saved by Chevalier. It was not a good kick at all from the Lens player. The match winner from the penalty spot last weekend against Lyon. Denied on this occasion by Lucas Chevalier. Unas with the corner. And it's Jallo at the back post. And the referee has pointed to the spot here. The yellow card has been shown. And the suggestion is that he spotted a bit of wrestling to the ground from the Lens defender. More penalty drama here. And another card. It's Massadio Aidara holding back Benjamin Andre. David, the Canadian, 13 goals in Lille's title-winning season 2 years ago. 19 in all competitions last season. He's already got 6 in the league this season. He scored in each of Lille's last 2 games. And he scores here. Jonathan David tucks in the penalty. And Lille have the lead in the derby.
And Andy, it was a tale of 2 penalties, as we just heard. A great save, and then a very good penalty from Jonathan David, who I think has moved to within 1 goal of Eden Hazard as the highest goal scorer since the turn of the century at Lille as well. That's a remarkable achievement for him. He's only been there, I think this is the 3rd season for Jonathan David. So a fantastic scoring record for him. It's his 7th of the campaign as well. Forgot to mention, Terem Moffi has 8, the same as Neymar and Kylian Mbappe as well for Lorient, but 7 of the season there. Andy, how did you see this one? In the end, probably a deserved victory for Lille.
Yeah, I think so. They played really well, actually. Lots of intensity. Played really high up the field in the second half, in particular, trying to get the second goal. They kind of had to weather a bit of an early storm. Lens were the better team in the early stages, but the penalty save obviously was transformative for Lille. The Lille fans really enjoyed that. They liked Lucas Chevalier, the young goalkeeper who comes from Calais, so he knows all about, he's steeped in the history of this fixture. Even at his young age, he knows what it means to them. I think they were worthy of the 3 points. It's the first clean sheet this season for Lille. Of course, their goals against column is still scarred by the 7-1 hammering at the hands of PSG in August. But still, this was the first clean sheet of the season for them, and lots of encouraging aspects to their performance. Lens, in the meantime, I suppose maybe they were due a defeat. They hadn't lost a game actually since early April, more than 6 months since their last defeat. It's a bit of a spanner in the works for them, but just a setback. I think they'll probably recover. I mean, at the end of the day, Lens would have been 3rd this morning had they won that game. They would have gone above Marseille. They're 4th today, which is just fine for them. I suspect they will not finish the season that high up. It's probably worth mentioning that their build-up to the game was overshadowed because they've lost their sporting director. Florent Gisolfi has been appointed by Nice. And Seko Fofana, the brilliant Lens captain, said during the week that Florent Gisolfi has been the architect of their success. It's something we probably don't think about enough, never mind talk about enough, that you talk about the players on the field, the manager, maybe the supporters, but there's so much more to it when it comes to having a successful team on the park. Sometimes you can just get things right at the right moment. It seems to be the case at Lorient with Régis Lebris, but when you have a guy behind the scenes, a team behind the scenes who are building things so intelligently, you lose that guy, then it does raise questions about what's going to. It's a bit like if, for example, a manager loses his trusty assistant who goes somewhere else, and you maybe don't think about it, but that can have a huge impact. In this case, they've lost the guy who has been so important in building that team with some really intelligent signings. He has decided, understandably, to move to Nice, where there's a bigger budget and probably a bigger salary for him, I suspect, as well. So not a great build-up to the game for Lens. And, Lille worth the victory, which leaves them just 5 points behind Lens now. So they're not a million miles away from their bitter northern rivals.
Probably not dissimilar, Andy, to the story of Luis Campos, who ran aground at Lille after masterminding that incredible title-winning season for Christophe Galtier as well. So, a sporting director in French football can be a very important figure. It's not always the case. We've seen them come unstuck in Italy and in England and be a position not always understood, not always given its full value. Baptiste, something to add on this Derby du Nord? It's just quickly, it's always a big moment on the French calendar, and this one didn't go according to form, but all the better for the league season, probably.
Absolutely. It's, as you said, it's one of the most passionate fixtures in the calendar, and good for Paulo Fonseca to get an important win. I think his tenure so far has been slightly uneven, although more ambitious than his predecessor, that's for sure. And for Lens, I think you could see it coming a little bit over the last few weeks. I think they've had such a wonderful start to the season, but their game against Nantes 2 weeks ago was really poor, I thought, and they scraped a win against Lyon, which is not negligible, but considering the Lyon that we've seen over the last 4 or 5 weeks isn't necessarily the scalp that it used to be. So I think it's a little defeat that will serve them in the long term because it will get them refocused. And like you said, the loss of Gisolfi and his replacement by Grégory Thiel which is an internal replacement, is going to be an important one for the future. But they're well set up, and they're also, I think, where they sort of belong. I know they're ambitious, but they're also cautiously ambitious, and I think they'll just look to build on their consecutive 7th place. So anything northwards of 7th is a huge achievement, and staying in the league, they'll use the Giroud mentality of staying in the league is the prime consideration. So they'll remain happy as long as they're in the top half of the table, I think.
They are in 7th place. I said earlier that Clermont was 7th. It is Lille, but only on goal difference. So Clermont are right there as well. Let's have a look at the league table. It's PSG leading the way then. They've extended their points gap over Marseille and Lens, obviously, who lost their undefeated record this season. But Lorient have closed the gap at the top to just 1 point. Monaco are on the charge. They're 5th now, just a point behind Lens. Rennes are closing the gap as well. They're 6th on 18 points. Then, as we just mentioned, Lille, Clermont, 2 points ahead of Lyon, who dropped to 9th place. Laurent Blanc, the new man at the helm, with plenty to do there. Montpellier are 10th. Toulouse have climbed up to 11th. They're level on points with Montpellier. Then Troyes and Nice on 11 points. Then 3 points down to a resurgent Strasbourg, who have climbed up to 14th. Reims, Auxerre, Angers all have 8 points, the same as Strasbourg. Ajaccio, Nantes with 7 points, and Brest are bottom of the pile with 6 points. That's the bottom 7 covered by just 2 points. So you're not out of the woods in this one, with 4 teams going down as well. The battle at the top is very tight, but the battle to avoid relegation is as well. Let's have a quick look ahead to next week then. We know we've got a full week of European action as well. Baptiste and Andy, I'm going to ask you where and why you want to go this coming weekend. It starts on Friday night with Strasbourg against Lille, 2 sides after good wins. Then Lorient, Reims, and Lens versus Montpellier on Saturday. Toulouse, Angers, Auxerre, Nice, Nantes, Brest, Rennes, Lyon, an interesting one on Sunday afternoon. Troyes, Ajaccio. Monaco take on Clermont, 2 informed teams there. And then, of course, Le Classique, the big one on Sunday night. PSG taking on Marseille. Marseille and PSG looking to bounce back. Baptiste, our special guest today on the podcast, where would you like to go and why?
Well, the obvious one remains PSG Marseille, but I'm really, really intrigued by Rennes Lyon next weekend. Laurent Blanc's first game at the Roison Park against Rennes side that are on a really, really positive run and who I think personally will finish on the podium. I think that I've got them tagged as third. So I'm looking forward to seeing that game. I think it might be a real attacking affair considering the way Laurent Blanc has liked to set up his sides and it'll be really competitive. And the atmosphere at the Roison is always good as well. So that's definitely one to watch for me.
Andy, where are you off to?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I think I'd quite like to go with Baptiste. Actually, what you could do, I've just been looking at this. You can get a train from Rennes, which will get you into Paris in time to go to the Parc des Princes as well. So you could go to Rennes Lyon at 3:00 on Sunday, jump on the train, which gets you to Montparnasse station, which is close enough, the Parc des Princes, to get you to PSG Marseille as well. So if you've got a bit of spare cash lying around and you fancy buying tickets for these games and jumping on the train, you could do both. I mean, yeah, listen, PSG Marseille is the biggest fixture in French football still, but the first game with Laurent Blanc at Lyon will be fascinating. And I think Strasbourg-Lille on Friday will be good too, because Strasbourg getting their first win. I think Angus Thuroud will be there, expecting them to now begin their march towards a top 3 finish. Their charge, exactly. So that should be fun, and yeah, the atmosphere at the Stade de la Méno under the floodlights is always good as well. So a good game to start the weekend and a good game to finish it too.
Fantastic, gentlemen. Thank you very much for your time on this Monday morning. You were listening to Le Beau Jeu with Andy Scott and Baptiste Reynaud. Have a great week. Enjoy the European football, and we'll see you again next time for more Ligue 1. Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Ajax delivery, Gendouzi's header. Here's an opportunity, Sanchez.
Outrageous goal from Gael Kakuta.
Payet again. And Dolberg.
Messi again. This time maybe Messi's done it.